At the crossroads of my life, where I knew neither night from day, I found myself astray in the great woods. For I was lost in the foreign lands, where the trees touched the stars and the forests were scattered amongst the dreams that were. And deep amongst that place I found myself in a clearing, and a wise man sat there in the ruins in the glade. He gazed upon me and warned me, saying, "The ground upon which you tread has been hallowed by the blood of men and the dreams of the everlasting. Those who are awake nor yet dying cannot abide it." And he raised a finger to me and said, "Your trespassing in these lands all these long years has violated the laws of memory and time. And so the fast-moving ones shall descend upon you. Be wary, for they are as relentless as the frost, and are as strong as the foundations of the earth." And at that time, an imposing and awful boulder, built of rusted and terrible iron, drifted amongst the trees. And when it emerged from the forest, it looked upon me. Its judgment was cold, and its gaze was piercing. It peered through me and into my very soul, and I was afraid. For I knew as well as it that I had tarried too long in these foreign lands, and in my apostasy I had violated myself and those who made me. The fast-moving one levitated towards me then with a gravitas that shook the very earth, and I looked upon the man who had warned me, but he had gone from that place. And so I stood amongst the glade no longer. I fled from that place, and the fast-moving one, that horrid ball of rot and rust, trailed after me. Its encroachment was pernicious, for it neither deviated from course nor speed, and every time it was that I dared to look upon my pursuer, I saw that it loomed over me, and misery pierced my heart. For within my spirit was an ocean where I was dragged about by the waves rather than being their master. The stars in my soul fell from their sacred heights like lightning, and the moon bled a terrible and disgusting ichor. All that was green and lovely was laid barren, and it was ever before my eyes that I could exist in this place herein no longer. For the foundations of my soul had been uprooted and placed upon an altar of putrid and bone, and all had gathered to prod and tear at me there, each taking their own sliver of flesh to gorge their bottomless hunger. And as they feasted, so they laughed, for it was I who had dragged my soul to that dreadful place, just as it was I who held the knife in a desperate and shameful sacrifice. The fast-moving one continued its pursuit of my form through the forests of the foreign lands. It tailed my memory amongst the fen and fields, over stream and stone. And at that time I came upon great and decomposing structures of men long past. Before me the bones of an immense and terrible Titan lay, the great castles of rulers long past, the serfs' humble hovel, mighty statues of those who would be, and the magnificent institutions of material understanding. All had fallen and were decaying the same, and phantoms of those I had known long past were there amongst the ruins, all stuck within their own understanding of what was. For while they went to and fro, their mouths were absent. No new songs were to be sung, and no new harvest was to be reaped, nor fires to be kindled. Each were broken apart and broken through, and though they tried, none could commune nor touch. There all were as silent and disconnected as bone. All was given there, and there again all was taken. I ran amongst the stones and those who inhabited that forsaken realm, and none took notice, for they were as lost as I was. Thus it was that I took refuge in the broken library that lay there, and within it I found that all the tomes had been ripped from the shelves and thrown all about the floor. Each was a memory, and each was a thought, and all were open. The ideas and dreams of what was and what could be poured from them. And there I was before a series of waterfalls. They crashed upon me and washed over me. The mangled vines of the falls gripped me and intruded into my skull and poisoned my mind, filling my head with all manner of things. The disruption within was too much to bear, and the sound was too great. My mind was made disheveled and chaotic. Nothing was clear there, and all things existed in stern and ardent conflict with life. There the tomes assaulted me, and each thought poured over into the next until finally I was laid empty and lacking. There amongst the tomes and the thoughts I cried quietly in a heap, for this place would neither comfort nor save me, and so I departed. I went out from that place and came upon the mountain that lay beyond, and I hoped for the safety offered by the old gods who made their habitation there. But when it was that I climbed to that mighty peak, no gods were to be found. For all their storied power and might, it was only the dwelling of rock and fog. There it was that the sun of my heart went black, and the specters of those whom I had known grabbed at my ribs and dragged me to the dirt. The rain hung in the air there, and despair himself dined with me. He called me forth and opened my form. He served me my own spine and mangled heart, and I cried out in that wild place. My adoration of God had abandoned me in the flight through the foreign lands, and I felt misery. For my heart had turned to dust in my mouth, as it was weighed nothing against such. And at that time I was mad with envy, and was forsaken as the apparitions amongst the ruins. And there was a mighty cliff upon the mountain top, and on its edge the promise of the flight to the nameless places could be attained. But such was a crime against the divine and the great gift within me, and so in my fear and shame I hid my face and I tore at my hair, and I went once more from that place. I trod down the mountain paths and found unsure footing, for my sense had gone out from me, and the fast-moving one was ever upon me. So sure was I that I would meet my ruin upon that mountainside, that I forsook myself in the light of a desperate hope. I ran more swiftly than my legs could carry, and I ventured where I could not see. And at that time I felt the earth shake behind me, for in my descent from that height, so too had the fast-moving one descended upon the earth and lurched after me. Its onslaught was terrible, and in my flight I dove into the madness of the mountain that lay beyond. For my life was forfeit then, and desperation had exacted its just toll. It mattered not then that I felt fear nor pain, for my mind existed in a cavern under the world where no light could reach, and all manner of foul things dwelt there. And they rose up out of the waters and covered my face, and I was blind in the dark. There they slithered under my skin, and there they tore at my teeth and nails with their pincers. And though my fear was great, my soul had left me, and my heart had turned to dust. And so I let them drag me down into the water's depths, where they feasted and festered and laid their eggs within my lungs. For my strength had left my passion, and I could not find the fire within to rage against their foulness. In my descent down the mountainside, there I saw a light shining in the distance, a candle in the window to all lost travelers in the night. And my soul cried out for that place, for even as hope failed and sense fled from me, sanctuary could yet be found. It was a shining temple that lay at the bottom of the mountain. The temple was white and carved from marble, and from its roof grew a mighty tree. Its leaves were pale and coated in dew, and light glistened from them in the dark. A wall was there too, and it hugged the base of the temple, built from adamant and silver it was, and there its gates stood against all the wills of the howling nights forever. And when it was that I arrived in that place, I came upon a knight. He was clad in shining white armor and was cloaked in understanding. Comfort and familiarity glistened off him like light, for he was a man who was sent by the permission of divinity, and had come to testify to that divinity so that I may find my own way. He himself was not that divinity, but rather a witness to it, for he was not someone who existed as who was, nor would be, but rather as someone who was who is. And he carried with him a wicked and delicate blade that was kissed by the moon and the stars. And when it was that I came upon him, I found him locked in battle with a wretched insect, who sought to desecrate that holy place. But the knight's footing was as sure as his sword rang true, and he dispatched the monster then, and I was afraid. At that time the fast-moving one trespassed within the walls of the sacred place, and like lightning the knight descended upon it and sunk his sword into its tarnished shell. The knight slew it then, and festerence and black mud spewed from its wound. The fast-moving one tottered away from that place, lifeless and broken, and never again was it seen, for it had been scattered and laid empty, never again to torment the inner places of those who were lost. The knight looked upon me and spoke in a voice that only I knew, saying, "Be not afraid, for I am a servant of the lands apart, and I seek only to gift the peace that follows in due course from the holy unity." I gazed upon him and I was amazed, and he continued, saying, "I have been within you from before the beginning, and I have witnessed what you have suffered, but have not seen yourself. Truly I seek not but their union within. But be wary, for I am but an extension, and cannot make all things clear, for they can only be revealed to you through your compliance with the divine permission as I have been." The knight extended his hand then, and spoke, saying, "Take of my hand, and come into your own." And I despaired not, for here I had found the familiarity, and the world was not as it was nor would be, but only as it truly lay among the cosmic order. Within that holiest of places incense filled the air, and many roots from the great tree lined the walls and sunk into the life-giving ground beneath our feet. Many knights gathered there in celebration. Admirable and strong men were they, and though their faces were hidden from me by their mighty helms, I knew them already, and they I. And in that place of rebirth and smoke I was led amongst the warriors to the screen that separated us from the altar of common accord. It was adorned in gold and light, and much honor was given to that which it stood for. And behind the slab of velvet and marble a man stood, and to him a book was brought. It was handed to me with great honor, and when it was that I opened it, my very doings flashed before my eyes. I saw laid before me my triumphs and failures in that moment. I witnessed my own loves and despairs, and much that once was revealed to me again. Those who were now dead had risen from its pages and closed my eyes to their flight, for their time had finally come. They held me and congratulated me and told me that I should not be buried among them. My own tears dropped away as those who were gone said their final farewells, until it was time for us to meet again. The barriers between my past and my present had begun to crumble and crash upon the rocks of my understanding like waves. Then he who served the altar spoke at length. "The foreign lands are treacherous and rugged, and those who are awake nor yet dying cannot abide them. For even as thou steps, so thou shalt be set upon, and grow weary in spirit and being. Thou shalt be faint, and thine understanding shall flee from thee. There shall thy world be torn asunder, and thou wilt find horrors and deceptions beyond all words. But be not afraid, for I say to thee that even in the city of the dead and the damned, there is life still. For it is only amongst this great terror and gnashing of thine memory that the sacred bliss of unity can be built. Therefore, trust and be gentle to thyself. For whence thou depart from this place, thou may yet again find thyself in those foreign lands. Recall the paths and despair not, for in the lands apart all doors shall be open if thou but ask. And again, thou must partake in this holy unity by the grace of the divine permission." Then the holy servant took a cup and poured the flame eternal, and said, "Life conquers memory and despair here, and in this sacred place thou shalt partake. Through this shall the unknown be made known, for it was hidden away within thee since before the waves crashed upon the sands and the first star fell." And I took the cup, saying, "Here I have found life made new, and mystery made seen. So again shall I tread the mangled paths reborn, with new eyes and soul, and so again shall I seek the bliss of the altar of common accord. And I drank. I turned then and offered the cup to he who slew the fast-moving one, and when it was that he doffed his helm, I recognized his face instantly, for it was my very own, and it was glorified. He turned then to me, saying, Long have I labored, and long have I hoped, for you have been lost in the fog of a times long past in shame and fear. Long have you run with ghosts, and long have you buried yourself. Yet all the while here I was, a faithful and hopeful servant to you. And in my hope I was told to foster a garden by the great gift through the permission of the everlasting. It was to be a place of rest and bliss, where one could lower the sword and plant themselves and grow like the flowers do. Tears fell from his face then. And here you are, and here shall transformation be found. And in happier days let us grow and hope together as one. He drank then, and cupped my face with both hands and kissed me. Hope and warmth washed over me. The lines of my form melted away from me, and my understandings blurred. All things that were, are, and could be danced before me again in a fervor like the cosmos. The beginning of all things and their fateful ends swooned and despaired in my heart. I witnessed that which could not be understood, but only felt, and I passed out of all thought and knowledge and danced before the great tree. What I once was no more, and who I had always been was. The grand connection, finding its roots in time asunder before, was now joy made new flesh, for all was connected here, and all found their right and just places. All that had been shattered was made tenfold the whole it fell from, and all that had been torn was sewn back together by its own thread. For God was in my heart there, and the universe fell from my mouth. And thus it was, in that sacred place, that I experienced the cosmos within made clear, and the space without made new. For the stars within my heart had been hung again, and the fire to rage was rekindled. And so I dreamed once more. I dreamed of a new life, of colors and sensations long forgotten. I dreamed of flowers in the field at sunset. I dreamed of the smell of grass and dirt. I dreamed of home, and I rested well. After an age had passed and we had returned, we were brought into the garden at the center, and a great funeral was held. For my body was broken and scarred, and it was laid upon the fire of roses and sunflowers. And there it was that all that was dead and broken was burned away and rejoined its place in the cycle of all. For he was gone from us and troubled us no longer, and instead serviced the world as nourishment for its life. Surely all that was given was taken again, and all that was taken was given once more. And in the light of the great fire a feast was held. All congratulated and adored us for the work that was done. There we sung, and there we danced, and there we honored the divine. For the foreigner was found, and he who had no strength to see discovered the lands apart. The cups ran over, and doves flew overhead. Their wings glistened within the stars. I lost myself there within the celebrations. I existed not as one who was, nor as one who would be, but as one who was, who is. Here I stayed until it was time to be called back and for this fleeting memory to fade. For the work had been finished, and it was time for a new song to be sung, a new life to be lived, a new garden to be planted. An old hope had been rekindled there, and though I do not recall all that happened in the grove nor the foreign lands, and that which I do recall inches from my grasp by the day, I carry it with me. For all that was lost had been burned away, and a new monument was built within me to stand against the howling nights forever.